welcome to History class. I'm Ms. Wokoma Tamono, and today I'll be taking you through on the theme Military Intervention in Governance. I will be looking at the topic, the 1966 coup and the counter-coup of July 1966. I guess you're wondering, 2 coups in a year, right? It's going to be interesting. And so at the end of this class, I expect that you should be able to define the term coup d'etat and also explain why the military took over government in Nigeria. And lastly, describe the cause of the coup d'etat, how the coup actually played out. And so in the course of today's lesson, we'll quickly look at the definition of the coup, the causes of the coup, and the people who took over power at subsequent times. I know you're eager to know what coup means, but before that, I'd like us to look at the introduction. The Constitution, like we all know, it's a body of law used by most countries to rule and govern their people. And one thing the Constitution does is that it provides the responsibilities and duties citizens and even leaders of a country are to carry out. One body the Constitution has provided this responsibility for is the military. They've been saddled with the responsibility to protect and also to defend the country from external and internal aggressions or attacks. For example, where you have issues like the Boko Haram, the militancy, and the rest, you see that the military tries to arrest such acts. You know, for example, also in Nigeria, where you have wars, you don't see lawmakers or senators going to fight the wars for the country. Rather, who? The military. They go out. Why? Because that's their responsibility. However, at different times in the history of Nigeria, the military saw the need or needs why they needed to come in and govern the country. And one way the military comes in to rule or govern a country is by a coup. And this will take us to the definition of the coup d'etat. The coup d'etat, which is a French word, is also known as coup. And this simply means a forceful takeover of governmental powers by the military. And it usually involves violence. For example, where you have a president or a prime minister ruling, and then the military all of a sudden comes and overthrows such president or prime minister, then you can say a coup has taken place. Most West African countries, including Nigeria, witnessed coup in one time or the other in their history. After Nigeria gained her independence in 1960, she was declared a republic in 1963. Afterwards, Nigeria had to be split into 3 regions. We had the northern, and we also had the western. And for these regions, the political parties at that period were all streamlined in line with these regions. We had, for example, in the north, we had the NPC. In the east, we had NCNC, and then in the west, we had the AG. And so political parties were all streamlined in these regions at that time. And then we had persons like the prime minister, who was Abubakar, Tafawa Balewa, and we had our ceremonial president, who was in the person of Nnamdi Azikiwe. And so that was how the country was until January 15th, 1966, when Nigeria witnessed her first military coup, which brought to an end its republic. And this came to be by reason of different factors that had played out even before the coup took place. We're going to be looking at these factors one after the other. They are the dispute over population census, corrupt practices of politicians and ministers, And then the crisis of 1964 federal election. Let's start with the disputes. The disputes like that occurred over the population census. Population census just simply means it's a count, a formal count, an official count, so to say, of the citizens of the country, where you see maybe from the federal, like from the federal government, people are assigned to do what this man is doing here. Go to houses, take number of citizens, and then they put them together to form how many people make this certain area, how many people make up this certain area. Like the north, the east, the west, and presently like the south. We have 4 now. In May 1962, the first census was conducted. And as a result of the census, the result came forth with the north having the largest population. And this was rejected by especially the people in the west who formed the AG and the people in the east, the NCNC. Remember, we talked about 3 of them. And so for the north to have the largest, they rejected the results. And as a result of that, the then Prime Minister of Nigeria, like I said, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, decided to conduct another census in 1963. And guess what happened? The result came the same, the north having the largest population. And so this brought out chaos in the country, especially in the western and northern parts of Nigeria. People took to the streets, they had to go on strike, people were fighting, like we can see right here, because of the importance of the population census. With the result, the country gets from the population census, they'll be able to allocate revenue to different regions and also to allocate the seats each region will occupy in the House of Representatives. For example, since the north, the largest population, they will be allocated a huge sum, to run their region, which will not favor the east and the west. And so also in the House of Representatives, they'll be given more seats against the west and the east. And so they had to actually carry out the strikes and riots or fightings. And so the military saw the federal government's inability to control the situation, and therefore they intervened. Let's say another cause of the 1966 coup. Another is the corrupt practices of the politicians and ministers at that period. The money that was being at their disposals, these people lived very flamboyant lifestyles, careless, they spent money carelessly and lived extravagantly. Rather than increase the standard of living of the citizens in their country or in their regions, they increased their bank accounts, they traveled unnecessarily, spent money on very frivolous things, things that were not necessary as at that time to the people and to the nation. And all of this was at the expense of the well-being of people. Rather than, provide social amenities, rather than give them good jobs and all of that, the money was being channeled to other things. And so the people suffered greatly and benefited little from the government. That was not all. The corruption was also found in the military. As time went on, the military noticed that their promotions and even appointments were not based on merits or ranks. I'm proud to this time, they were based on merits and ranks. People got promoted because of their ranks, because of their experience in the military. But at this time, it wasn't so. It was based more on tribal relationships and even political affiliation, like from the top. People got appointed based on those things. And so for this reason, the military were not happy. And so they planned to take over the government to curb these corruptions. Another reason why the military took over power in Nigeria was the crisis of 1964 federal election. A general election was held in 1964 in order to elect members in the House of Representatives in Lagos, because as at that time, Lagos was the capital of Nigeria. But before this election took place, all the political parties in Nigeria at that time came together to form two broad political alliances known as the NNA and the UPGA. Let's see what they actually mean. The NNA means Nigerian National Alliance, and this alliance was formed by parties like the NPC, NNDP, and Mixed Democratic Fronts. And then the UPGA means United Progressive Grand Alliance, which was formed by parties like the AG, the NEPU, NCNC, and other minority parties. Now, in a bid to gain more seats in the House of Representatives, these two alliances were ready to do anything to gain that. And so they resulted to massive rigging in this election. That's illegal actions that actually take place in an election. For example, during elections in some countries, you see people run with the ballot boxes. You know, people go, everyone is expected to fill an election form for a candidate, like a citizen, a candidate. But then you get to see people filling in tens and in hundreds, one person, which is illegal in the election. And so all of these were done, like what you can see this guy is doing, stuffing in the election box with even fake election papers. All of these were things these alliances did to gain more seats in the House of Representatives. And at the end of it, the results came out, and there was serious argument concerning the results, as nobody allowed the other to win. Nobody accepted the other as the winner or as the party with the higher number of seats in the House of Representatives. This began to take the country towards a point of anarchy, disorderliness, lawlessness, because the people were not in accordance. There was so much chaos. And because of that, the military were not also happy. And so they thought it wise to come in and also get control of the situation. So all of this made them think and plan on carrying out a coup, which eventually led to the first coup Nigeria witnessed, which brought an end to the First Republic. In January 1966, precisely on the 15th, the coup was carried out. And it was carried out by a group of majors from the southeastern part of Nigeria. They were led by a major known as Major Chukwuma Nzogu. And as a result of this coup, like we had said, the coup usually is associated with violence. The coup overthrew the government of the then Prime Minister, in person of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, and then Major General Agunyi Ironsi, who was from the southeastern part of Nigeria also, took over from him and became the new head of state. This coup was also a violent one, and as a result of it, claimed the lives of prominent men in the country. It claimed the lives of people like the federal prime minister, in person of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, also the federal minister of finance, and other senior officers in the military. In Agunyi Ironsi's position as the new head of state and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, raised a lot of issues as the Northerners suspected a foul play in the coup and also believed that the coup was a plot for the Igbos to rule Nigeria. And so all of these made them angry and caused them to oppose the regime of Aguiyi-Ironsi strongly. As a result of this regime of Aguiyi-Ironsi, they also felt threatened. They felt, oh, the Igbos were now coming to rule over them. The Igbos were always going to have power over them, you know. And so because of this, they really didn't want it. They stood against it firmly. Also, they felt his policies were to favor these Easterners and had no place for them. Why? One of the policies he did was to replace federal system of government with the unitary system of government. Now, the federal system of government is one where the governmental powers are shared from a central point of government to even the states, you know, where they have to do certain things on their own individually. They had their own powers to an extent. But then he came in and then he moved this system of government and brought in the unitary system of government where all powers were centered in just one person at the center of the country, or at the center, of the government, which was at that time him. And so him being from the east had them feel that the Easterners were always going to rule over the Northerners, and they were going to have power over them. And that was their fear. As a result of all of these, the Northerners had a plan. And then, in July 1966, they revolted. They got up and then considered they were going to take over the government. And like I had said, one way the military always takes over government is through a coup. And so they staged a second coup, which is known as a counter coup, or the second coup in Nigeria. And so as a result of that coup, Aguiyi-Ironsi lost his life with some other southern officers too. And after the coup, another head of state took over in person of Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, now became the head of state of Nigeria. And after this coup, subsequently, Nigeria also witnessed some other coup. About 10 successful and unsuccessful coups were carried out in Nigeria. Let's take a quick recap of all we've learned today. We talked about coup, and we said it simply means a military takeover of power in a government. And then we saw that the 15th of January, Nigeria witnessed her very first military coup, which was led by Major Chukwuma Nzogu. And then we considered some other factors that led to the military coup of 1966 in Nigeria. We also saw the different factors that led to the coup of 1966 in Nigeria. We considered the factors as the dispute over population census, the corrupt practices of the politicians and ministers, and then the crisis of the 1964 federal election. And then we also looked at General Aguiyi-Ironsi's regime and how during the period of his regime, another coup was staged in July 1966, which is also known as the counter coup. And after which, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon became the new head of state. Before we go, I'd like us to answer this question to know how well we understood today's lesson. The question: which one of these people ruled after the second coup d'etat? A. General Aguiyi-Ironsi, B. Major Chukwuma Nzogu, and C. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon. Okay, if you picked A, you're wrong, because General Aguiyi-Ironsi ruled after the first coup. And then if you picked B, you're equally wrong, because Major Chukwuma Nzogu didn't rule, rather he led the group of majors who carried out the first coup. And so it shows us that our answer, C, is correct. I'd like to say we've come to the end of this lesson. Thank you.